Please. By the way, John also takes good care of the curator. He's my husband, so.
Best job of all. Well, I suppose every one of you has started out using code. I would hope.
There's a few that are new enough that
38.
They,
but everybody, almost everybody anyway, gets away from it and drops it. But I guess everybody knows that there's two codes, landline code and the wireless code. Any of you ever used landline code? There's all the punctuations are different. All the figures are different except the 4. There's 8 letters that are interchangeable between the two codes, but don't mean the same thing in each code. So switching between one and the other, for me, came easy because I learned them both at the same time.
You ever find yourself starting out in one and finishing out in the other?
No, never. And I'll tell you what stopped me from doing that. When I worked in St. John's in Newfoundland, I used to work the Marconi station at Signal Hill. They had a circuit, that's the way all the stuff from Labrador came in. And I happened to work that circuit. And one night I asked the guy that was working up there, when I started learning the wireless code, for some practice. And he said no, just a curt no. And for a second it hurt because he was one of the finest men I'd ever met. And then he explained, he said, when you sit down in front of a sounder, you just listen to that sound. You think landline code. When you put on a pair of earphones, forget it. You think what's coming over the air. And he said, when you get to the point where you can separate the two without any problem, you'll never have a problem again. And it was right. And when I first went to Gander to work, they had the proverbial English setup, a long boardroom table with 20 guys sitting around it, and the supervisor or instructor at one end with a key and an amplifier in the middle of the table. Everybody had their own key, but you had to listen to whatever he sent on the amplifier. And there was one other guy there that had come from the landline department of Post and Telegraphs as I had. And so the one letter that if you make a mistake is the one you're going to make the first mistake with is the R. And that's the F in the other code.
Okay.
And he made the mistake, and I said something back to him, and he caught on, and he started saying something in landline code, and I talked back to him, and we started talking back to each other in landline code, which the instructor had never heard before. So he says, out. The both of you, out. And he says, go see the supervisor in the morning and get assigned to a circuit. So that was the extent of my, I had 4.5 years working high-speed Morse up till that time. And I started working landline code on a low-speed or a low-powered wireless set because we didn't have any landline sets. And I was working 2.5 years before I knew what a sounder looked like. So interchanging using the landline code on the wireless to start with, and then interchanging the two codes afterwards, I could, even now, I can read both codes at 50 words a minute and switch between the two of them and without missing a letter.
Wow.
Because it came, you know, hours, days and weeks and months of switching between the two of them. Because the place I grew up in, got the first job, was the contact point for the customs cutters between Newfoundland and the mainland, which Newfoundland at that time was not a province of Canada. It was a separate country. So they had customs cutters running between there. And they were a contact point, and because they were ships at sea, they had to use the international code. So I'd copy international code on the wireless, then turn around and send the same stuff in landline code to our regional office. So I was just working the both codes all the time. So, and then I'd go home and listen to the transatlantic news on the radio at night, and practice that way, listen to that stuff. Because in those days they used to have those transatlantic wireless stations, and they were sending news all the time, of course, 24 hours a day. So you get lots of practice in the international code.
Were you connected in any way with the cable stations in?
No, they were a different company altogether. Yeah.
Okay. I used to hear people sending dit dit da da da, and a long time before I found out that was the real telegraph Morse.
Yeah.
Dit dit for all.
What they call the mother code,
Yeah.
the mother language. Well, of course, it's a little H-kit amplifier sitting under the table there. We used to work, when I was working landline, we used to work about 45, 50 words a minute. Just a normal working speed.
Just with a bug or a 3 key?
Oh, hell. If you know anybody on this earth that could ever do any more than 22 words a minute
That's what I wondered.
on a straight key for more than half an hour, you know,
If you're doing it all day, every day.
Oscar Wilde notwithstanding, you'd be like this by 10:30 in the morning, you know.
And on disability by the end of the week.
Hmm?
On disability by the end of the
Yeah,
week.
right, you got it. That's what they used to call, now they call it carpal tunnel syndrome. It used to be called the glass arm. So you ever hear anybody mention that term, glass arm, that's where that came from. Your wrist was brittle, like you had a broken wrist.
Always send with the same hand?
No, unfortunately.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Because when I was working, you know, you had to number and initial all the messages as you sent them. So if you ever had to slow down to number every message and time it with the right hand that you had to send with, you wouldn't get anything done. Because the first job I had outside of the little office I started in, you had to do a minimum of 350 messages a day. And that's 7-hour, 8-hour day with an hour out for lunch. And if you didn't do 350, that was the minimum, you had 30 days to get your speed up to that point. And if you didn't, out the door, there's a line up a half a block long waiting for your job, you know. So you had to be good or you didn't last. As I used to say, you're either good or you're gone. That was it. And 45, 50 words a minute was standard operating speed.
How did you transcribe that? Did you use a typewriter or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after the first year when I learned to type, used to go back at night and practice on my own, get the key and get in the office and practice typing, but you couldn't possibly write that fast anyway.
No.
What they call a mill, it's caps only?
Right, yes. I wish I had one of these. I tried to get one but couldn't get one, and now they're worth a fortune if you can find one. But I know they got some of the fonts they got on some computers. You can duplicate that with the large and small capitals.
Yeah, it's the dents in the paper you can't duplicate. It's the dents in the paper you can't duplicate.
Yeah, right. So I've got a setup there with portable Morse set that I made to carry around the demonstrations that we have, if anybody is interested.